So please join me in welcoming Jim Albaugh.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I look out on this audience and I see a few old friends. John Warner used to be the chief administrative officer of the Boeing company, and I figured out very early in my career at Boeing you had to be nice to John because he decided whose businesses were in bad enough shape to have to talk to the board of directors. So I made very good friends with John, and then Bob Watt, who used to run state and local for us, and then Bonnie Dunbar and I grew up about 50 miles apart from each other in a couple of dusty towns in eastern Washington, and I had the opportunity of helping her get in space a number of times in the orbiter, and also built the engines that she went in space on. And then over here I got my old my college roommate. They surprised me with him, Pete Beege. And I promised Pete I wouldn't tell any stories about him if he wouldn't tell any stories about me. But I will tell a couple. I remember the first day we moved into this house off campus, and it's our first day there, and we decided we're going to cook dinner. Cooked dinner, not bad. You put the dishes in the sink, and we left there the next May. They were still there, and nothing had moved. But the thing about Pete that always struck me, Pete always got what he wanted. I mean, he was very persistent. And I remember Pete and I went to a Oregon State University football game one time. We were sitting up in the very, very top seats. And he looked down at the track during the football game and he said, I really like the looks of that cheerleader down there at the end. And, I stood up to cheer and he was gone. And next thing I knew, he was down there talking to the cheerleader, and they got married about a year later. And they've been together, ever since. Aerospace is a great business to be in. And when I think of the 20th century, I can't think of an industry that did more to change the 20th century. When you think about the Allied bombers and airplanes that were built during World War II. You think about the jet age, certainly brought upon by the Boeing company. You think about man walking on the moon. You think about how communication satellites changed the way we communicate. I really think that it was an industry that did more to change how we live than any other that I can think of. And I've had the pleasure of being here about 18 months, and I just reflect back on the things that have happened in the short time that I've been here. We flew the 787 Dreamliner for the first time on December 15th, 2009. And I remember when that airplane was coming down the runway, I think everybody felt the same way I did, whether they were there in Everett or watching on TV, anticipation, concern. And then I think everybody felt great joy when that airplane took off. And I said that day, I said that 20 years from now, I think that rainy day up in Everett will be viewed as a day that really changed the way airplanes are built and the way that airplanes fly. And nothing has happened since then to change my mind. We had another day like that last year, and that was February 8th of 2010. And that was the day that we flew our first 787-8 airplane, the biggest airplane that we've ever built. And I was walking in here today, and somebody whispered to me that on this day in 1966, we took our first order for the 747-100. And that was back in 1966 on this date. And it was an order for 25 airplanes for $525 million. I can assure you the price of those airplanes has gone up considerably since then. We had another great day on March 20th of this year. Some of you may have seen that orange airplane that's flying around. And that was the 747-8 Intercontinental. And that's an airplane with a brand new wing, brand new engines. And the Airbus A380, that big airplane that they're flying around, this airplane will be much more efficient than that one, and I think we'll sell a lot of those airplanes over time. When I grew up in aerospace, I worked for Rockwell International. We got bought by Boeing in 1996, and I've had a chance to work in a lot of different locations on a lot of defense programs, a lot of space programs. And there are a lot of really good defense and space companies in this world, and certainly Boeing Integrated Defense Systems was one of them. But there's no company like Boeing Commercial Airplanes. I mean, it's a company, I think, that has really changed the world in many, many ways. And when I think back on the history of this company, I can't imagine that there's been a more important moment in its history than right now. We've got to deliver on the promise of two brand new airplanes, the 787 Dreamliner and the 747. We've got to make decisions on products to replace some of the programs that we have right now. We've got to decide on how we're going to build new derivative airplanes from our 787 and our 747. We've got environmental regulations that are going to be unprecedented in terms of how difficult they are going to be to meet. And then we've got to get our labor strategy correct in 2012. So a lot of things on our plate. You saw the video, 2010, great year. We delivered some 462 airplanes, 376 of those were 737s, the most we've ever produced. Going into the year, we thought we'd have about 250 orders. We got 530. The market came back very strongly. Our backlog right now is 3,400 airplanes, or about $260 billion. Now that sounds great when you go to Wall Street and you say, look, I got 7 years of backlog. You can be assured that we're going to make some good profits over that time. But when the market comes back and you have good customers and they say, I want a 737, I want it next year, and you have to tell them to get in line, that's not a good thing. What we're doing is we're driving people to buy airplanes that they don't want to buy because we don't have any available. And as I tell the team, it's not about having the best airplane, it's about having the best airplane that people can buy. And as a result, last year, we made some changes in our rates. We announced we're going from 31 737s a month. We're going to go to 38, and a very good chance we're going to go to 42. On the 777, we were at 5 airplanes a month. We're going to go to 8.3. That's 100 a year. And that's more 777s than we've ever done in a year. And there's a reasonable chance that we could go to 10 a month or 120 in a year. And on the 747, we went from 1.5 airplanes to 2. 2011 is off to a pretty good start. You probably all read the newspaper about Boeing winning the tanker program. Anybody miss that? I've been working on that program for 10 years, and I'll tell you what, that was the longest running soap opera since the days of our lives. And I was very excited that we won that. And I was excited for Boeing, but I think I was really more excited for the working men and women of this country. That's 48,000 jobs. 48,000 people that can buy homes, 48,000 people that can put kids through school. And I was ecstatic to win, but I got to think that Obama had to be more happy that we won. I'm not sure how he would have answered the question of shipping 48,000 jobs over to Europe. What we're seeing right now is real improvement in our market. Over the next 20 years, it's our view that this market is going to be $3.6 trillion, or 31,000 airplanes. And when you think about that many airplanes, about half are going to be replacement airplanes, and about half will be airplanes coming into service as a result of airline traffic. And airline traffic goes up about 1.5 times the world GDP. And if we pick a conservative number like 3%, we can get to those 31,000 airplanes pretty quickly. We're also seeing some very changing trends in terms of where we're selling the airplanes. If you go back to 1990, over 70% of the airplanes that we sold were in the United States or Europe. Right now it's about 50% in the United States and Europe, and you go out another 20 years and it'll be about 60% in other locations besides America or Europe. And about 85% of the backlog that we have is outside the United States right now. And we, Boeing, we need to become much more than a Seattle company. We need to be much more than a U.S. company. We truly need to be a much more global company than we are today. I think the other changing thing that we're seeing is much more of a demand for the wide-body airplanes, and I think that's just a factor of globalization as people have to travel longer distances. Last year, about 20% of our orders came from wide bodies. This year, we think it'll be 50 to 60%. One of the things that I've learned, and we keep talking about, is that being Boeing is not an entitlement. It's not an entitlement that people are going to buy airplanes from us. And over the last several years, we have disappointed a lot of customers as a result of being late on the 787 and the 747. On the 87, my view is this is the first new airplane of the 21st century. I know my friends in Toulouse will say that the A380 was, but in my view, the A380, while delivered in this century, was really the last airplane of the 20th century, and that it used old technology. The 787 uses new technology. And I think that we pushed technology a lot with this airplane. Many of the technologies were not as mature as they should have been. We outsourced things to companies that really didn't have the experience in what they were doing. And then I think we put a schedule in place that didn't allow for some of the unknown unknowns and some of the inventions that you have to have in a development program. And we learned from all those mistakes. You know, that said, when we deliver this airplane, and we're going to deliver it in a few months, I think that people will forget about the fact that we were late, because this is such a game changer. This is an airplane that's going to be 20% more efficient than the airplane that it replaces, about 60% quieter, and we're going to humidify it. You're going to feel a lot better when you land after a long flight to Europe or Asia. On the 747-8, again, we've got two models, and we'll be delivering those this year, both the freighter version and also the intercontinental version. And from a trip standpoint, it'll be 20% more efficient than the A380, which the Airbus company is building right now. Let me just talk a little bit about, you know, where we're trying to go and where we're trying to take the company. And one of the things that I want to be is I want to be the best by all measures. And when I say the best by all measures, I'm talking about the company with the most revenues, the companies that is selling the most airplanes, making the most profit. But I think more importantly, to be the company that the airlines want to come and do business with. You know, right now we're number 2 in a duopoly. And I think you all know what being number 2 in a duopoly is. That's being in last place. And we don't want to stay in last place. You know, the first thing that we want to do is extend the programs we have. And certainly the 737 and the 777 and the 767 have been real franchise programs for us. So we want to extend those as long as we can. But at the same time, as we see competitors enter the marketplace, we know that we're not going to compete based on having the lowest cost airplane to buy, but we want to make sure that we build the airplane that provides the most value to the customer. And if one looks at the 737 compared to the A320 or the 777 against the A340, you know, the cost of ownership is much lower for a Boeing airplane. The maintenance costs are lower. The reliability is better. And we need to make sure that we invest in the technologies necessary to make sure that while other people are building today's airplane, you know, we're always building tomorrow's airplane. And that means, again, investing heavily in technology. You know, we were disappointed. We were late on the 787, but one thing I don't want to have happen is for us to get conservative. You know, we're a company that is always pushing technology. If I compare us to Airbus, I'd say there's a fundamental difference. They build an airplane, and then they try to sell it. And we sell an airplane, and then we try to build it. And, you know, there are problems with each, but I'd rather be the one that's selling the kind of airplane that people want to fly, that provides them the value that they need. And then we've got the technology and the people that can help us make those decisions. You know, we really are at a crossroads. We've got to deliver on the 787 and the 747, and I think we will. We're about 92% through the flight test program on the 87, about 80% through on the 747. But there's going to be a lot more competition 10 or 15 years from now than there is today. And we've competed against the Europeans over the last couple of decades. And I think we probably took them a little too lightly. And they build a good airplane, there's no question about that. But if one projects out another 10 or 15 years, we'll be competing against the Brazilians, the Canadians, the Russians, the Japanese, and certainly the Chinese. Now, the Chinese have decided that they want to be in the airplane business. And they've said they're going to spend $35 billion over the next 10 years to try to build an airplane that can compete with the Boeing company and Airbus. They recently built a regional jet, spent $5 billion on it, and they threw it away. They threw it away because they couldn't get it through the flight test program. But that didn't stop them. They're going to spend $20 billion on a new airplane called the 919, which will be in direct competition with the A320 and the 737. And again, I come back to, you know, how do you compete against a company that's heavily subsidized, you know, has the financial resources and the human resources necessary to get into a market? You do it through technology, and you do it through having an airplane that's more advanced than the competition. If I look at the other issue that we face, and that is the institutional knowledge that we have. You know, we have just brilliant engineers. I've been around engineers my whole life. I've put people in space. I've built you know, fighters, bombers. I've done just about everything you can do on the defense side. But the technical integrity and the depth of the engineering at Boeing commercial airplanes is really something. And then you look at the mechanics that build the airplanes. They truly are magicians. They can do things I don't think any other workforce in the world can do. But I think that, you know, over the last few years, you know, we have have done some things to the point where we don't have the allegiance of some of the employees, and we need to win that back. We've made some decisions over the years, I think, that the workforce has reacted to. Moving to Chicago was one of them, I think. A few years back, we were talking about how, this isn't a family, this is a team. We decided to move some of the manufacturing to Charleston. Some of the issues that we've had on the 787 and the 747 have been attributed to decisions made by leadership, and I think that's all fair. And we've also, I think, come to work and talked about shareholder value and economic profit and things like that. And I'm not sure that anybody gets up in the morning and decides they want to go to work and work on economic profit. I mean, I do because I have to, but I think most of the workforce comes to work for other reasons. They come to work because they don't want to disappoint their colleagues. They feel like they got to pull their weight with their team. I think they come to work because they understand how important what we do is to the customers, keeping the people that fly safe. And I think they come to work because of the heritage of the company and what that heritage represents, which is, to me, a company that's done things that no other company in the world can do, and they take great pride in that. I think we're doing well with the team right now. I think winning the tanker was a real shot in the arm, no question about that. We've hired about 5,000 people in the last year. We're going to hire 3,000 or 4,000 more as we come up in production. And I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to be in the job I'm in. The state of Washington has really helped us a lot, and I want to applaud everybody in this room who has worked so hard to support us over the years. The tanker win, it wasn't just about writing a good proposal and turning in a low price. We got a lot of help from the governor. We got a lot of help from all the elected officials in the state of Washington. I'll tell you, Norm Dix, I think, has made a phone call on our behalf every day for the last 10 years. I mean, he wore the people out to the point where I think they felt like they just had to give the work to us. But the way the state has been unified has been terrific. I worked for 25 years in the state of California, and we could never get that congressional district to agree on anything, let alone supporting a program like the tanker deal. Some of the reforms that we're seeing on competitiveness have been great. What we're doing with workman's comp, some of the things that we're trying to do with unemployment insurance. And clearly, to me, when I go to Olympia, a lot of people understand that the business climate is an important thing to work on. But when they ask me what's important, I say, well, the business climate is, but the thing that's much more important than that is education. About half of our engineers can retire in the next 5 years if they decide to. First of all, we're going to try to keep them, but we're not alone. If you look at Northrop, you look at General Dynamics, you look at Lockheed, all the aerospace companies, they have that bow wave of people that came in during the space race, during the Cold War. They'll all be going out at the same time. And are we going to have the people necessary to replace them? You look at the United States, and we're a net importer of research and development. The investment in research and development is not what it's been. What I'm afraid of is what I've coined as the intellectual disarmament of our country, and I really do worry about that. And I know the state is in a difficult position relative to the budget, but I would tell you my personal opinion is we ought to put a fence around education. That's the one place that we can't afford to cut back on because that is our long-term future. The Higher Education Task Force, I think, has had some very good recommendations. Many of you I know have been involved in that. We think there's an opportunity for a great public-private partnership. We're ready to step up and help with the endowment for education. Clearly, we need to understand the long-term survivability or sustainment of that endowment, but I think it's something that's important, not just today, but certainly in the future. Somebody in Olympia asked me the question. They said, we're a little overly dependent on Boeing. What can we do? And I've never heard that being overly dependent on Boeing was a bad thing, but what I came back to is education. It is the intellectual capability that our people have here in the state of Washington that's going to make us great and will continue to make us great over the years. So let me just close. I think I might have a couple of minutes for Q&A, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. Let me just close by saying, thank you for the opportunity to come today. And it's been great to be at Boeing Commercial Airplanes over the last year and a half. And some of the decisions that we will make will really determine what kind of a company we're going to be in the decades ahead in a very different world than we live in today. Thank you.
What we'll do is, if you have a question, find one of the people with the mic, and we'll just go back and forth with people that the mic handlers.
Excuse me.
Bill, do you have somebody there?
Thank you for coming today. The commercial airlines themselves have a long history of struggling with profitability and challenges associated with just being basic operators. How is Boeing looking to try and improve the rank and file of their key customers?
Well, you go back over the last 30 years, and John Warner would know this better than I do, but they've had a very difficult time covering the cost of capital. There's no question about it. They made $18 billion last year, though. And this year I think they're going to make 8 or 9. You know, when I go and talk to an airline, they don't care if we re-engine an airplane. They don't care if we build a new airplane. They don't care if we improve the airplane that we're building today. All they care about is helping them improve their business case. And what they're looking for us to do is drive the efficiency of the airplane. And here I'm talking about the specific fuel consumption, because it is all about fuel consumption in airplanes. And we are doing that. If you look at the 787, as I mentioned, about 20% more efficient than the airplane it's replacing. The 737 that we're delivering this year will be 7% more efficient than the one we delivered back in 1998. So we know we need to continue to improve each and every year. And then, of course, we're trying to do some things in the maintenance area as well. You know, if we can aggregate across the entire installed 737 fleet, I think we can do the maintenance and support a lot cheaper than individual airlines can do with just a small number of airplanes. So we're working that too. But it really is all about profitability. And with oil, you know, going up like it is, and if you look at the macroeconomics of things, if air traffic goes up 1.5 times the world GDP, and the world GDP goes down 1% for every $20 increase in the cost of oil, there's some point at which they're going to stop building or stop buying airplanes.
Thank you for being here and for providing the update. I'm curious, is the movie on YouTube that I can send to my friends in Europe?
Is it? You're not talking about your friends in Toulouse, are you?
No.
I guess it isn't up on YouTube. No.
The last Boeing speaker here made some ink when he talked about transportation. He didn't think it was what it ought to be. How is transportation locally as an issue for you now compared to a few years ago?
Well, I wasn't here a few years ago. I know in 2003 when we were making the decision on where we're going to put the 787 manufacturing, House Speaker Chop stepped up, and so did the delegation in Olympia. And, we got some funds to improve the access to our Everett facility, and we appreciate that. I'll guarantee you, when I'm driving from Renton to Everett, it's a hard trip sometimes. I wish we had more transportation north-south. But most of our parts come in on rail, or they come in, via airplane. So it really is not impacting our ability to produce.
All right. I got a question over here. Well, go ahead.
Jim, hi. Steve Leahy. I used to run the Chamber of Commerce after Bob Watt moved off to your company a few years ago. I and many in this room, of course, understand the need to compete and all that other stuff, but I guess I really want to say this brief comment to all of us who are Washingtonians, and I didn't even realize you were a native. I happened to be in Charleston 2 months ago. I'm telling you, your plant there and what you are going to do to transform that community is the biggest thing to hit them in a positive way since the Civil War ended. They are so grateful that you are there. They are turning those community colleges and training institutions and the University of South Carolina to be as customer-centric as possible. You're raising the average wage in that community, and you're raising home prices there. So the lesson is, and your predecessor, Mr. Mullally, used to say this also, competing every day forever is what your labor force, but all of us in this room need to know, is you've got options to be a successful global company. So anyway, I'm hoping your labor negotiations go really well, but I've just had a personal, visceral experience with a community that is so grateful to have you there that we better not take you for granted here, ever.
Yeah. Well, I am optimistic about 2012. I mean, we have too much to lose. Both of us do. And I think we're doing a pretty good job so far getting ourselves aligned on what the big ticket, the big picture items are that we need to agree on. And the devil, of course, is always in the detail, but I'm optimistic.
All right. one more quick question.
Great. So, fantastic presentation. So, So in business school, I remember taking an operations class, and we read a book called The Goal. And the whole concept with it is if you had a backlog, the idea is to increase your manufacturing capabilities so you can make more money. So when I think about your 7-year backlog, why are you not spending 100% of your effort trying to get more planes out the door so that you can increase your revenue near term?
Well, we are. And those of you who are around in 1998 when we shut down Renton because we tried to come up in rate too quickly without really understanding the dynamics of the supply chain, know why we're taking our time doing this. I mean, this is all about risk management. This is all about making sure that the tens of thousands of suppliers that we have and the millions of parts that go into these airplanes are going to be there on time of the quality that they need to be. So I would say that many of the old timers in Boeing would say that we're being a little aggressive as we come up in rate. But we're managing it, and I think we'll be successful. It's a good question, though.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.